Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy Contours podcast series. I'm your host for today, Eugene Chausovsky, and I'll be talking to Dr. Farid Shafiyev about Azerbaijan-Armenia relations and their impact on geopolitical dynamics throughout Eurasia and beyond. Farid is chairman of the Baku-based Center of Analysis of International Relations and adjunct lecturer at ADA University. Dr. Shafiyev also joined Azerbaijan's Foreign Service in 1996, where he has worked in the Political Military Issues Division and in the United Nations Affairs Division. Dr. Shafiyev also served as Azerbaijan's ambassador to Canada and the Czech Republic. Farid, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for kind introduction.
Of course. So, Farid, it's been actually a little over a year since we last spoke on the topic of Azerbaijan-Armenia relations and those implications for Eurasia. And there's been quite a lot that's happened since that conversation that we had. First and foremost, we had the return of Donald Trump to the presidency in the US in January, which was also followed by a peace agreement that was initialed by Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan at the White House back in August. And there was also a subsequent announcement of this new Trump route for international peace and prosperity, or the TRIP route, to enhance regional connectivity efforts with the backing of the US. So I thought maybe to start off, could you provide a bit of context on what led up to that agreement or those agreements, and what is the current status of relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia?
Sure. I'm not going to dwell much into history, as very shortly after 30 years of occupation, Azerbaijan in 2020 and then in 2023 liberated its territory and affirmed its sovereignty over its internationally recognized borders. And that has created conditions for peace, which is based on mutual recognition of both countries' territorial integrity, because the core of the conflict was Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, former Nagorno-Karabakh autonomy, which was claimed by Armenia and which was part of Azerbaijan and reconfirmed by the United Nations Security Council resolutions in 1993. So after all these events, Azerbaijan proposed a peace agreement based on 5 principles, including mutual recognition of territorial integrity. We had some mediation by EU former Council President Charles Michel, but after some of the problems in 2023 in the relations between Azerbaijan and European Union, Azerbaijan favored a bilateral track because there was an attempt by mediation from Russia, from European Union, from United States. So it all created a bit competition between all these global actors. And Azerbaijan favored bilateral track. And finally, in Dubai, in July this year, both leaders, Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, and President Armenia agreed informally on some basic principles. But the process, I would say, needed some boost, some sort of injection from international actors, despite that, as I said, we both preferred eventually bilateral track. But when you are coming to the kind of conclusion, the third party involvement sometimes helps to create certain commitments. And that commitment and that injection came with you mentioned the Donald Trump presidency, the second term. Now many international pundits, experts, politicians, they discuss the impact of President Trump policy on different parts of the world. But in this part of the world, in the South Caucasus, I think, and hopefully it will stay like that, Trump's involvement was quite a positive. On August 8, in Washington, Prime Minister of Armenia and President of Azerbaijan initialed text of the peace treaty, which was agreed upon previously, as I said, during the about 3 years process was from 2022 up until 2025 July. So, and this create kind of commitment from both parties to the peace treaty, to the major principle, non-use of force, mutual recognition of territorial integrity. So in that sense, the injection and mediation by President Donald Trump was indeed positive. What also I have to note is that for the last year, we didn't have any incidents on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There is complete peace. There is the negotiation on the delimitation of borders. So the second peace treaty, it's one track, and the second track is delimitation of border. And another important outcome of Trump meeting in Washington and Trump mediation, it's so-called TRIP, Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, because one of the contention issues is the connection between the mainland of Azerbaijan and its part called Nakhchivan, which is divided by Armenian territory. And Azerbaijani side called it Zengezur, Armenian side called it Syunik, but the most important thing that we have now TRIP, Trump Route for Peace and Prosperity, which will create this important link between two countries, and between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan, and between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which in the future will be serving as a connection, as a transport hub for the whole region. Just would like to mention that peace treaty has not been signed itself, because we expect that Armenia will make changes to constitution to remove any indirect or direct reference to former Nagorno-Karabakh, which still exists in the preamble of Armenian constitution. But this is something which hopefully will be dealt with in 2026, probably after elections, which is in Armenia in June 2026, which is important because the Pashinyan agenda of peace and normalization with Azerbaijan and Turkey, I think that's the only road for sustainable peace and development in the South Caucasus. So that's in the nutshell what has happened in the region, and it's happening in the region. So 3 tracks: peace treaty, delimitation of borders, and connectivity.
Understood. Thanks very much. So there's a lot to unpack with what you mentioned, Farid. And I think it is worth kind of emphasizing a point that you made in terms of, previous mediation efforts, because obviously this was a conflict or a zone of tension that had been going on for many decades. And despite efforts at mediation by countries like Russia or even European countries, we didn't see much progress until after the 2023 timeframe, and then a lot of progress was made on the bilateral track, as you mentioned, between Azerbaijan and Armenia directly. But as you said, there was a boost needed from an international actor, and we got that from the U.S. and from Trump involvement. And there's still a lot of issues to hash out, but clearly we've seen a very big change, even if we're comparing the situation to this time last year when you and I last spoke. I mean, I think there's been some very significant progress made there. So kind of touching upon something that you mentioned in terms of not only the peace and border delimitation and things like that, but also the connectivity projects and the connectivity implications of this ongoing negotiation and peace process. And obviously you've already touched upon the trip routes, but also there's other different initiatives there, whether it's the Southern Gas Corridor, the Middle Corridor, even Azerbaijan's inclusion into the C5+1, which is the U.S. diplomatic and economic initiative with Central Asia. So I'm curious, what is your outlook for Azerbaijan and these regional connectivity efforts, given all of the dynamics that you've just mentioned?
Yeah, Azerbaijan indeed investing in connectivity, because connectivity is not only transport project. I think it's also part of the normalization process. Just if we recall that recently Azerbaijan first time allowed grain delivery from Kazakhstan and from Russia to Armenia for its territory. Also Azerbaijan first time in these 30 years, first time from the day of independence, supplied Armenia with fuel. which pass through the Georgian territory. So this is the part of maybe small confidence building measures we can call like that. Though, of course, the confidence building measure, it's another track, which probably I should mention during the first question. So definitely the grievances and grudges of the past, it's hard to forget. Certain part of Azerbaijan territory completely flattened, and we need to deal with landmines problem. But in both sides, there is, of course, enough mistrust towards each other. But some contacts began at that level. And so reinforcing it by connectivity projects, I think this is a good thing to do. But connectivity also, at the end of the day, it's the commercial project, it's the geopolitical project, and we're speaking about so-called middle corridor, corridor stretching from Europe to China and vice versa. And I have to remind that in the 90s, European Union came up with the idea of Traseka, Transport Corridor, South Caucasus, Central Asia. But after that, for certain reasons, the attention to this geography, to this region, went down. But after the war between Russia and Ukraine, the northern route was basically shut down, and some tension in the Red Sea caused by another conflict in the middle, Houthis, Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The importance of middle corridor is increasing. We see 5 times increase the number of cargo between China and Europe on this so-called middle corridor, which China, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey. Definitely, there are some skeptics about this corridor, as with any other project. We're speaking about multimodality, the cost a bit higher than, let's say, if you're using traditional ocean ways or northern route. But what the figures indeed already has manifested, that companies began using this transport route, and Azerbaijan investing, and Azerbaijan believes this is important route. If you look at the geography, on the north to Azerbaijan is Russia and south to Iran. And during, by the way, Israeli-Iranian war, recent war in June, air traffic increased between through Azerbaijan. So we're not just speaking about cargo, we're speaking about air traffic. Also, we're speaking about fiber optic, it's the high internet traffic. Now Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan is building the fiber optic cable across Caspian Sea. So there is certain potential for middle corridor, and Azerbaijan participating in different platforms, whether it's the political platform like C5, which now became C6, or other platforms, Organization of Turkic States. So all this, in a sense, has geopolitical and geoeconomic implication for the whole region.
Understood. Thanks very much. So, you mentioned a lot of these projects, middle corridor, C6+1. As you say, it's not just economic projects, but there are geopolitical and geoeconomic dimensions to them. So I'm curious what your assessment is of the role of external players. We've already mentioned the US, you brought up Europe, but also you have other important actors like Turkey, Russia, Iran, China. So how do you see those types of actors shaping this process, both economically but also geopolitically moving forward?
Yes, we see definitely some of kind of impetus from the rivalry, global actors rivalry. But in the meantime, that's maybe also the opportunity to speak about not a zero-sum game. If it's gain for China, it's the loss for United States, vice versa, but something which can bring benefits for all actors involved. European Union, I mentioned already in 90s, we were pondering about the project, so making a little investment. Now, European Union came with the idea of so-called global gateway, 10 billion euro pledge for developing this transport corridor, though the European Union has not much invested yet. More we see sort of verbal commitment. So we have to assess the European Union involvement upon its concrete results, concrete steps. Unfortunately, we don't see, but at least there is some political commitment. China is developing. They call it Trans-Caspian International Trans-Caspian International Transport Route. So that's to China, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and we see interest of China to this region, to these corridors. And now we see United States with the idea of trip. Of course, there is a bit competition between those, or at least each actor views suspiciously involvement of another actor to that project. But I think this is beneficial for countries of the region to have investment in those projects. As far as the regional actors, Turkey is very interested because Turkey is a part of Middle Corridor. Already Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey built railroad, and using the highways, delivering cargo to Europe and back. So two other actors, Iran and Russia, they have a bit ambiguous position. Russia, on one hand, is interested in the projects because they are Western borders with European Union, basically. There is war with Ukraine, the border with Belarus and then with Poland is shut down, and the same with the Baltic states. So Russia is interested, but there is some voices in Russia about the involvement of United States in this project, like Trip Corridor. But they have not openly, Russia has not openly objected to this project, but we can see some voices inside Russia against these projects. Iran is, of course, concerned by the possible presence of United States TRIP project. But, when someone says that the United States will emerge in the region, the verb will, United States already in the region since 90s. I'm speaking about oil project, energy project, gas projects in Azerbaijan. American companies were very active, and now the Exxon might come back with new project in the Caspian Sea, in the Azerbaijan sector of Caspian Sea. So, but, I think we have to look at the Iranian position from the standoff between the US and Iran and Israel and Iran. So they are very, very concerned. But I think it's up to the countries of the region, and the peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan takes conflict from the tools of geopolitical, I would say, tension used by geopolitical actors for their own benefit. Because when two countries fighting each other, so it's not in their benefit, it's the benefit of outside external powers. So if it takes this conflict, and we're already doing that, then of course we have indeed good opportunities to use all these transport projects for benefits of people of both countries.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that overview of the external players. As you mentioned, there's quite a lot of actors there that can shape this process. But I also don't want to diminish the role of local actors, particularly within Azerbaijan. I'm thinking, whether it's from civil society or businesses or even think tanks, including your own organization, the Air Center, in shaping this process both on the diplomatic and economic levels. You actually recently, your organization hosted this first annual U.S.-Azerbaijan think tank conference in November, which I had the pleasure of attending. And during that conference, there was a lot of participation across policy, academic, and think tank audiences, and also got the opportunity to hear a lot about some ongoing dialogue that you guys are having on the Azerbaijani side with your own Armenian counterparts at various levels. So I'm just curious if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely the role, I think the expert community is important to explain to audience and sometimes explain to even countries which are concerned about certain development, that this development is not against them. We, as at our Air Center, we're working closely with a number of think tanks in the United States, in Europe, in the region. And you mentioned this first think tank forum between US and Azerbaijan, which we have organized. We are government-funded think tank. We are open about that on our website. So we're trying to explain what's the position of the government, but it's not just the government business. Indeed, if you look at the dynamics of what's happening, it's the interest of businesses when we're speaking, for example, about connectivity or energy projects, and it's interest of people to live in peace. So we have at our events a wide range of think tankers or experts, some independent, some government, some international organizations. So we're trying to combine all the views, and we invite also occasionally we invite all experts, regional experts from Russia, from Iran, from Turkey, from Central Asia, from Europe, from China. So we have quite busy schedule. You can look at our website, aircenter.az, and we indeed benefiting from expert opinions like yours and other experts from the United States, how we can tackle different issues, whether it's the conflict or some economic opportunities arising in the region or outside of the region.
Understood. So I think just to kind of summarize our conversation, you made a lot of very salient points, Farid. There's been a lot of progress made, yet, if we're just comparing, our conversation today to that which we had a little over a year ago, but still plenty of challenges, as you mentioned, whether it's from external actors or even, local and regional dynamics. So still plenty of work to be done there. But I'm curious, kind of ending on perhaps a somewhat optimistic note as we're looking ahead to 2026. What do you see as kind of the hopeful or the best case scenario for Azerbaijan, for its relations with Armenia, and for these broader regional connectivity efforts in 2026?
Yeah, definitely we have to still keep in mind that there is ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. There is ongoing conflict in the Middle East, despite the agreement on ceasefire in Gaza. There is a relative situation. I'm trying to find the words, what the situation between Israel and Iran, and which is hard to find the proper term. And there are some other things in Middle East. Syria is still an unknown future. But by the way, Azerbaijan is trying to make small contributions to the peace in the Middle East. We are trying to help to rebuild Syria. We are working with some other actors to bring peace in the Middle East. But definitely our geography, South Caucasus, Central Asia, is where we have indeed stable partners. We have developing a partnership, cooperation with across Caspian Sea with C6, Organization of Turkic States. We're increasingly speaking about our regional platforms like D8, it's an economic platform in the Middle East. And sometimes, maybe it's not formal platforms, but different troikas or quads in our region. For example, I would like to mention the meeting between Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, our traditional cooperation between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. In that sense, we see increased, if you look at the figures, trade figures, definitely we are not using still the full potential with our Central Asian partners and with some other partners across, region. But there is a big increase in trade and investment, which gives hopes that with better geopolitical situation, I'm mentioning what's happening in the north and in the south, we will have opportunities for cooperation, which might involve United States, European Union too, because actually United States, we're now working on strategic agreement. That's one of another outcome of August 8th meeting in Washington. It's not only about Azerbaijan, Armenia, but also Azerbaijan and United States. So that gives a bit optimism to what's happening around us today.
Got it. Thanks. And I'm looking forward to hopefully we can speak at this time, next year, and hopefully a lot of those things that you've mentioned will actually come to fruition. But that's about all that we have time for today. If you'd like more in-depth analysis and forecasting related to Azerbaijan and Armenia relations and the related Eurasian connectivity topics that we talked about, please check out our website at newlinesinstitute.org and also the work of the AIR Center at aircenter.az. Thank you very much, Farid, and take care.
Thank you.